Okay, so let's start. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the special meeting of the Brookline Select Board for December 9th. The time is 6:31. Though we don't have a normal agenda, I will just point out at the moment we are all online separately. Myself, Guy Tanza and Gwen Tanza, Bruce Mello is dialed in, Joseph Dutton is dialed in, as are the folks from Fact TV. The only other expected participant would be Shelby Brimmer. We're not expecting anyone else. So the first thing on the agenda is to appoint an acting treasurer. So let me just say a couple of quick things. So we all got the resignation note from Sarah the other day. First, I want to just make a point of saying that we really appreciate all of Sarah's hard work and all of the effort that she put into doing this. It's been a difficult year for everybody. It's been a particularly difficult year for her. And she toughed it out as long as she could and continued to do the job, even though she really didn't want to for quite a while, but she stepped up for the town and put forth all the effort she could. But she has officially resigned. And so we're going to do two things. We're going to appoint Samara to act as treasurer for the remainder of the term, which Samara is on board with and is okay with. Then we're also going to just authorize me to sign the People's United Bank signer forms so that Samara and Guy can be authorized as signers on our account. And I'll just add that joining us, Mike, is that you? I think that's joining.
Yep.
So
hey, Dave, how are you?
Good. How are you? So Mike Masters is joining us also. Mike, once we've appointed Samara, Mike is going to be hired as one of the assistant treasurers. And our hope is that Mike will be interested in continuing and standing as treasurer once we get to town meeting, but we won't put too much pressure on him right now. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Samara Zwick to complete the current term of treasurer until town meeting. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Joseph. Any discussion? Any questions from anybody about that?
Do you have to accept Sarah Wiswall's resignation first?
I don't think that we do.
Okay.
I think I've stated that she has resigned. I don't think we really have to approve or disprove of that. She has the ability to resign, but that's a good point, Guy. Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of appointing Samara Zwick to complete the current term of treasurer until town meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that has been approved. Then the second thing is I'd like to make a motion that we authorize myself as the chair to complete the People's United Bank paperwork and sign it to authorize Samara Zwick and Guy Tanza to be authorized signers on the town's account. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Seconded by Gwen. Any discussion or any questions on that?
Dave, that's a resolution?
It's a motion.
No, is the paperwork a resolution for the bank?
Yes, yeah, sorry, yeah. It's a business deposit account resolution. She left some stuff for you and I. There's also something else for you to sign in addition to this. Yep. Okay, any other questions? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of authorizing myself as the chair to sign and complete the People's United Bank authorizing Samara Zwick and Guy Tanza to act as signers on our account, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And Gwen, you seconded that, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I guess I have to remember to do the minutes for this. Okay, that's it for the initial item, then moving on to our only other agenda item for the night, which is budget planning. So, Shelby's joined us. I'm going to let her in.
Doesn't help you too.
Yeah.
Hi, Shelby.
Hey, sorry, I had a little difficulty finding the right Zoom link.
It's okay.
I kept trying to rejoin us last week.
So just to recap what you've missed, we appointed Samara as the acting treasurer
Oh, that's better.
for the remainder of the term, and we authorized me to sign the People's United Bank paperwork to have Samara and Guy be signers on the account.
Okay.
And now we're going to start on budget planning. So a couple of things to point out about the budget planning. I have not asked Archie or Mark to be here because my goal for the evening is simply for us to work through the operations budget, Fund 1, and through the appropriations. We will not go into discussing the highway budget until we'll put that on the agenda for next week's regular meeting. Archie and Mark still need, I have talked to Archie. Archie and Mark still need to talk through some stuff to make sure they're on the same page about any tweaks to the budget. Also, Samara is currently in the process of sort of cleaning up and finalizing the last fiscal year numbers. And in particular, she still has quite a bit of work to do on the highway fund. Things need to be put into different lines and just it needs quite a bit of cleaning up. So she doesn't have very accurate final numbers on where we ended last year for the highway stuff. So she wants to be able to do that, and Archie wants to be able to have a bit of a look at that before we continue the discussion of that. So that being said, unless people have, so everybody got the worksheet that I sent around, hopefully?
Yes.
And Mike, for your benefit, because I didn't include you on this, I'll email you a copy of this right now so you can follow along as well. Just give me 1 second.
What do you need?
I saw one here the other day,
What?
the brown ruler.
It's in the
Oh,
office.
I don't need it.
So Mike, I just sent you a copy of the same PDF that these guys have. It's hopefully coming through.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. So unless anybody has any objections, my plan would be to simply work from the top down. As much as possible, we'll, have the general assumption with a lot of things that they're going to stay the same. I mean, certainly people have the opportunity to propose changing, going up or down, but we'll try as much as possible not to dwell on discussions of things that we're not going to change for the moment, just for expedience sake. Does everybody have access to a copy of the worksheet and follow it. So I guess I mentioned in the email, but Samara pulled a different report from Nemrick, the system that we use for all the bookkeeping, that she thought might be easier for us to use. And potentially, this may potentially be what we use in the town report. I don't know, we'll see how we feel about that. But the version that we've been using for a long time is
Smith?
This is last year. I generated my own reports.
it's somewhat overly complicated. And so whether we stick with plugging these numbers into the same kind of spreadsheet that we've typically then printed out and provided in town report, we can discuss at a later point. But for now, this worksheet has all the same numbers. So it will be a little bit easier, I think, for us to work through and keep track of where we're at. Anybody have any questions or concerns about working through that?
I have one thing just to say is
Sure.
I'm looking at the PDF, but just because I didn't pay to have like whatever the heck the programming is, I can't edit it, and so I assume that you'll edit this and post it when we're
Yeah,
done.
exactly. And so I have a spreadsheet that this came from, and I'll say that I've purposely not shared the spreadsheet with anyone else because I'm going to be the sole keeper of that spreadsheet. So, right, everybody has a PDF, which is a non-editable version of the same worksheet. And as we work through the numbers, I'll plug them in. And then when we're done with this, I'll provide a new version of it that'll reflect what we've done. But just to prevent any potential confusion by multiple versions of the spreadsheet floating around, we'll do it that way. Does that make sense? I assume it does. Okay, so starting at the top, and Guy, I'll probably ask for your input on, of course, a number of these things, particularly with some of the revenue numbers, as to whether we think we might want to tweak anything that we've projected based on the same thing that we projected last year. So starting at the top, current taxes obviously gets figured out once we figure everything out, so we don't need to worry about that. Penalties, we have historically, for the last few years anyway, projected $1,500 in revenue for penalties. Last year, we ended the year a little under 1,000. I'll say that at the moment, we look like we're at about $830 through the year. So does 1,500 seem like a safe number to stick with?
Actually, I'd like to reduce that to $1,000, only because we've already collected $836 for penalties. And right now we have an outstanding balance for delinquent taxes of a little less than $600. So that will not generate any more penalties going forward. For the 22, I'm sorry, we're going toward the
Right.
22-year
Right,
budget.
exactly. Right.
And historically, people have gotten into the habit of paying their taxes, and I think $1,000 would be a more safe bet for revenue than $1,500.
Okay. All right. That makes sense to me. Any concerns from any of the members on that? All right, so we'll plug in $1,000 for penalty. And just as a reminder, the first block we're going through are operating revenues. So that's money that we have potentially coming into us. Moving on to interest on taxes, we've historically budgeted 1,100. There were no numbers at the moment in the prior tax year for some reason, but I think that's still something Samara is cleaning up. This year, we've got about 595 so far.
Yeah, I'm showing 583. Yeah, but and again, because this year we waived the first quarter interest rates due to the virus situation and trying to show some compassion to people. So again, I think the interest rate will come down, but I would be safe to put $1,000 in there, just to reduce it by $100.
Okay. Because presumably the interest will go down if we have less penalties coming in. So if we're budgeting for less coming in on penalties, presumably,
Mhm.
right, oh, that won't, okay, so we'll go down to 1,000.
Yep.
Okay. Current use, we have historically budgeted 13,000 for current use. And I have to admit, going through stuff Samara's provided, we don't have anything in that account either for this year or for last year. So I'm not honestly sure what the deal is with that. I don't know if you know.
And again, with current use, that's money that the state gives back to us for what we pay in current use for people who are enrolled in current use. And I personally think that $14,000, I would increase that by $1,000 because there are a number of people who have enrolled in the current use program this year. There's a number of properties, I know 3 or 4 of them that have. So I suspect that
Gonna be high.
I think 14,000 would be a better figure for that number.
Okay. All right, so we'll increase that to 14,000. State per parcels. Again,
Oh,
looks like there's nothing in it at the moment, but we have budgeted 300. We were a little over that last year, but not.
Basically, we get $1 per parcel. We have 334 parcels. So again, we're going to get about $338 from the state, or 334. So whatever you're comfortable with, 340 is fine with me.
Okay, let's go with 340 then, just to make it a little bit closer to accurate.
The U.S. Refugees Revenue Sharing, that's the property that's owned up on top of Putney Mountain Hill. It's the Sylvia property from the former representative or senator from Massachusetts. And anyway, basically what it is all the state parks in the United States, whatever revenue they generate, they split it among everyone. And we historically have been getting about $100 to $115 a year. So I think 115 is a viable number.
Okay, so we'll change that to 115, 115. All right, what about clerk's fees?
It's low this year.
Again, this year what happened, the reason there's such a big jump there is that we went from $10 a page to $15 a page. That was the state mandate that was passed in the last legislative session. So I'm more prone to think that we're going to have, right now I'm looking at state payments. Hold on a second. Civil funds.
I have about $2,000.
I already have $1,700 this year, and we're only halfway over. So I'm going to be comfortable to raise that to about $4,000.
Okay. All right, so we'll bump that up to 4,000. Dog licenses.
Again, we have 125 licensed dogs in town this year, and that's pretty much where it's been right along. The town gets $5 per dog. So 5 times 125, that's what, 625. But we also have penalties, and that's why you see the number, it's 982. So I think 600 is a fair number to guess at.
Okay, so we'll keep that at 600. Copy revenue.
Again, this year we're having a banner year because there's been so much activity in the office with the refinancing and selling and so forth. Right now I'm showing hold on, clerk fees. Copies. I'm showing 401. That's totally off. This is okay. I would say that I would like to have that to $1,200.
Okay, push that all the way up to 1,200.
Yes.
From 9?
Yep.
All right.
Only because we're charging more for we went from $2 an hour in the clerk in the town office to $4 an hour. The amount of the amount that's cost for copy is $1. But again, we've had so much activity in the office. I think that's going to generate a little more income for the town.
Okay.
So I feel comfortable at $1,200. Marriage license, that's a hit and miss thing. The town gets $10 per license. So we do 4 or 5 license. I would say $40 is fine.
All right, we'll change that to 40, but nothing substantial. Birth and death certificates, apparently, I don't know if I remembered we were.
Okay, those are basically certified copies, which the town charges $10 a person, $10 a copy. Again, we're doing a lot of stuff online now, so a lot of people can do things online. They can, ask for that, but still, we do a number of certified copies, and I feel comfortable at $100. I just think that's a pretty
We'll
honest
leave it
number.
there. Records restoration revenue.
Again, that's predicated on, we now put $4 per copy. When we record an instrument, we charge $15 a page. Of that $15, $4 goes toward a restoration fund.
Mhm.
It used to be $2.
Yeah.
So I feel that if we do 600 pages, that's almost close to 2,400. I think about $1,500 would be a fair estimate.
Okay, so bump it up from 1,400 that we had last year to 1,500.
Yes.
Okay.
What did we decide $100 for the
Yeah.
certified? Okay,
For birth and death certificate. Yeah, we left that at 100.
okay.
And then interest on investments, we've usually just gone $10, even though
Yeah.
maybe it's-
Only because
Maybe a little bit
the
more.
interest rates have been 0.
let's just leave it at 10.
Okay, I think that's good for what I have.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions in regards to some of the figures that I've submitted?
Do you expect that like clerk fees and everything are going to maintain at their heightened
Yes, only because, Joseph, only because we went from $2, which is where we were at 3,500 back in the budget year of 20.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I was just like, I mean, we've been, and maybe not necessarily just the clerk fees, but we've been awfully busy because there's a lot going on in town, and it's not like we can see into the future, but you do think that we're going to continue to be busy through next year at least?
Yes, I think going to 2022 only because of the fee being $15 a page. So that will certainly create some revenue more than we did back in 2020. There's a lot of activity going on in Brookline. People are refining. And the bottom line is that because interest rates are so low, we may not be selling properties, but we're doing a lot of refi, and we're also doing a lot of trust. So all those documents are $15 a page. So I suspect that that's going to increase.
I'd still leave it the same.
Okay.
Okay, any last questions for the moment on the revenues before we start working through the operating expenditures?
I thought we weren't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, continuing on down the list to the Fund 1 operating expenditures.
Dave?
Yeah.
Dave?
Yep.
I must have been on mute. I have one question.
Okay.
Quick. What was the total on the U.S. revenue, refuge revenue sharing again?
115. I'm sorry.
115. Okay. Thank you. I'm good.
Okay. So I'll just note that I just plugged them quickly into the spreadsheet, and basically we're increasing our projection of revenue by a little over $1,000 from last year, $1,015. Just
Okay.
so we know where we're at the moment. Okay, first up is the select board stipends, which haven't been changed. I know there were some discussions last year about possibly considering changing them. I don't know if anybody has interest in delving into those. Currently, the 6550 is, 1,200 for not the non-chair, and then 1750 for the chair.
For the chair.
Anyone have interest in delving into whether we change those numbers?
I think it should stay the same.
Bruce, what's your feeling?
I concur until we can, especially until we see what the whole budget looks like. But right now, I don't see the reason to raise it. I'd rather give other people increases if we feel it's marginal, like the treasurer, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like other officials will look at that more seriously, I think.
Well, so one thing I'll say is, and I don't know, practically speaking, that we're going to have time to be able to do this in the amount of limited time that we have to finish our budget. But
I know what you're going to say.
We are pretty overdue for really evaluating compensation across all of the town positions in relation to the VLCT compensation numbers that they put together. So I would say, as an aside, it doesn't change whether anybody wants to do anything about anything now, but I will say one of my goals for the coming year would be for us really to get back into that and do another fresh evaluation of compensation for all the town positions in relation to the average compensations for the state, stuff like that. With that being said, Joseph, what's your feeling? Do you want to consider making any changes to the select board compensation for the moment?
I don't think so. I mean, I know I was the one that kind of initially brought it up, and we had a long discussion that sort of satisfied my questions. I would certainly not be inclined to talk about raising it, but I think that it's reasonable where it is now.
Okay. Shelby, what about you? Anything you want to change about that?
No, I'm fine with where it's at.
Okay. All right. So let's assume for the moment we're sticking. We'll plug in 6550. Town clerk, like I say, Guy, I do think that in the coming year we need to reevaluate compensation across the board. But for the moment, we're not in a position to do that. Time-wise, do you see any concerns with the clerk needing to add more hours or hours?
I think hours are okay. Basically, people know that if my car's out there, I'm available. And, I do a lot more hours than I'm compensated for, which is fine. I don't mind that. But I do have an issue with the compensation rate. Right now, we're at 1975, and we have not had an increase since 2016. So that's a 2-year period of no increase whatsoever. And I'm thinking that I'm going to ask the select board to approve or consider a rate of $21.75 for the town clerk and the treasurer. I don't know what the treasurer's feeling is about that. I know I've had some conversation with Samara, and she feels that we should all be on same parity because we're a small town and we basically function together. We help each other. So I don't think some person should get more than the other, but that's just my opinion. But I will express a desire to raise the rate from 1975 to 21.75. Looking at the compensation report that I have in front of me from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, we are at the low end for compensation. So I feel justified in asking for that. We do a lot of things. Our town is one of the few towns, if many that don't, but we receive absolutely no holiday pay, no vacation pay, no health benefits. The only thing that we have is workman's compensation, and that's because it's required by law. So I think asking the town clerk, who not only takes care of all the town clerk duties, but in our small town is also responsible for the office, for taking care of the cleanliness, taking care of the supplies and so on and so forth. I think it's a fair request. Again, I'm not going to be the town clerk forever. And the next person that comes in, we have to have a suitable package for the next person to pique their curiosity or their desire to join. With, with minimum wages raising on a yearly raise basis, rather, I'm sorry. I just think it's a fair thing. I don't think it's asking for a great deal, but I think it reflects what you ask your town clerk to do.
Okay. So that's an increase of about $2 an hour over what we have previously done. The thing I'll say is that I guess I'm going to suggest that we pull this aside as a separate issue to discuss, because to be honest, I'm not sure how easily, and I don't necessarily want this entire discussion tonight to be taken up trying to work through the particulars of this and not get through all of the other budget work that we have to do. But I guess before that, I'll say that I'm open to that as an idea. I want to do my own research and look at the compensation for VLCT and analyze it. But I'm not at all opposed to the idea. Like I said, I think it's something that we need to do. Bruce, what's your feeling about the concept, whether or not we delve too far into it tonight?
Whether we delve too far into it tonight.
We're not.
No,
Well,
it's going to take a lot of time.
We're not going to delve way into it tonight because we do not.
Right.
This is
The 2 points that I have is the first point is what Guy raised. Like he said, he's not going to be town clerk forever. And if we're not on parity or on par with other towns, it's bad enough. It's sooner or later, the town's going to have to pay benefits. And if you factor that in, which we're not, if you factor that in down the road, and we're way behind on the compensation end, it's going to be a real burden for whatever select board it is to do that. But it's direct answer to your question. No, I don't think we should go on infinitum about this. And I guess you're packaging it together with the town clerk as to discuss it all one shot.
Well, I guess what I'm going to suggest, although I'll be honest, I don't. I'll be honest, I feel a little, I wish this had been brought up prior to tonight, because I don't feel good about reevaluating only certain compensation for certain town officials and not doing all of them, to be honest. I think it's potentially
I concur.
compared to the listers or the auditors or our road supervisor, et cetera. But so it potentially throws a little bit of a wrench into a decent amount of the budget, but we can work through that if everyone is in agreement. This is something we should put our attention to for this budget cycle. Gwen, what's your feeling about it?
I think it needs to be discussed, that's for sure.
Do you think it needs to be discussed in time to make effective changes for the coming year's budget?
For this budget, yes. There hasn't been anything done for 6 years. Not just town clerk, for all of the positions.
Oh, can I speak?
Let's give everybody a chance to weigh in first before we do that. Joseph, what's your take on it at the moment?
I'm definitely open to a discussion, and I think it would be appropriate to have that discussion for this upcoming budget. But I would agree with you that we can't pick and choose what positions are getting salary increase without examining all of the paid positions. And then also, I don't think that we can make those decisions without examining the the standard of the surrounding towns. I know, like the compensations report. I just tried to look it up online, and I'll
Shelby.
have a copy from you guys. So
Well, and there's a newer version of it, presumably, which I'll be honest, I haven't even seen. I assume
on
there's a
the-
2020 version, which
We have it on the counter on those file cabinets in the,
right. What about the
version.
electronic version of it, Guy? Because I think we're going to need we don't have to figure that out this second, but
Yeah, yeah.
we'll need somebody who can
and I
access.
just wanted to address Joseph's
Hang
concerns
on one
about.
second. No. Shelby, what's
I'm
your
sorry.
feeling about it? We'll come back to it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to discussing it. I too think that if there's going to be some kind of increase, that it would be, if we're going to bother looking into it, we might as well look into it to see if there's if that we should be doing a more universal increase as well. And I definitely think I'd like some time to look at some of the materials and the new report that came out. But I do think it's a good conversation to have. And if there's time, I'd like to have it before we finalize this budget.
Okay, so okay, sorry, go back. Guy, you had an additional point you wanted to make.
Okay, I just wanted to get back to Joseph in regards to his query. The bottom line is that each one of us, the town clerk, the listers, the auditors, the treasurer, are a separate department that are elected separately, and they should represent their budget needs at a meeting. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have that. So when I present what I think the town clerk requires for a good compensation rate, doesn't necessarily mean that the treasurer agrees with me, but the treasurer should also submit some sort of ideas of what she thinks a fair compensation rate is for her department. And the same thing with the listers and the delinquent tax collectors and so on and so forth. That's why I presented just the town clerk version. And because I wear a number of hats, I will also address each one that deals with me specifically as an elected official.
No, and that's fair, Guy. And I guess what I'll say in defense of, well, the treasurer, who is now, as of 15 minutes ago, our treasurer again, for the time being, has shared with me some thoughts on potential. But the first thing that she said is we really need to go through the compensation manual and reevaluate all of the town salaries. In defense of the auditors and the listers and those people, no one has, I haven't asked them. I have not solicited from them thoughts on what their compensation should be. Historically, I don't think we've done it that way. What we've done is we've done an evaluation of all of the positions based using the compensation data from VLCT as influence or whatever. And it's true, we've been, as a board, delinquent on doing this for a number of years. And I don't have a problem with delving into it, but what I'm gonna suggest is this. I'm gonna suggest a couple things. One, I think we need to form some kind of subcommittee who can start to look into this, because the reality is it is potentially going to take a little bit of time to do the research. And we do have a fixed deadline of when we need to get all of these things done. So rather than try to work through the conversations of it in the context of normal select board meetings, I don't think we have enough meetings and enough time purely in the board meetings to be able to get through this. So I would suggest that possibly 2 select board members volunteer to be a effectively working group subcommittee that could try to do some of this research in the ensuing time between meetings so that we have some of the legwork done. And I'll
I
throw
agree.
out there that I won't be volunteering to be one of those people. So first, Guy, before you say anything else, so Gwen, Bruce, Joseph, Shelby, can I convince any of you to take on doing
When's
some of this
the,
research?
when's our next, or when are we expecting our next review of the, like, when would be the next time we would be discussing this? And need to have that
Well,
information?
next week's meeting,
Yeah.
we'll be discussing some amount of it. It's
Yeah.
dependent on what we get through tonight, but we'll certainly be discussing it again next meeting. We'll certainly be discussing it at the first meeting in January.
Mhm.
In an ideal world, we would be finalizing it at the first meeting in January. I
Okay.
suppose, we have probably the flexibility to not actually finalize the warning, which includes the budget numbers. We can probably finalize that at the last meeting in January.
Yeah, my schedule gets a little less crazy with coursework after Sunday. So, I mean, if somebody else was willing to also kind of throw their hat in, I would, I think I could definitely put some effort into that starting next week.
Anybody else interested in helping Shelby out with this?
I'll just say from my perspective, with how my schedule is, it would be, I can't really volunteer to help on a segment. It would work. It would be, if we can't figure anything else, it would be more productive for me to just say we should just extend this select board meeting. It would work better for me to have the meeting from 6:30 until 9:30 or 10 rather than to try to.
Jeez.
Yeah, I know that that's unappealing, and I'm not saying we have to do that. I'm just saying that would really be more appealing to me than to try to fit another day in.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about that is that practically speaking, we're not going to be able to get all of the information together in a way that everyone can discuss it and make any sense of it tonight. That's just
Well,
not.
I'm not saying tonight. I'm just saying at a meeting to come, it would make more sense to try to tackle that at a longer meeting than for me personally to try to fit something else in.
Okay.
I mean, I guess, why don't I just pull together what I can by next week, and at the next week's meeting, we'll see what I've been able to kind of synthesize information wise to give us all, and see what materials I can put together so we all have something to reference, and then maybe we revisit if we need additional meeting time after that. But I mean, I was just thinking if I had somebody else who was also able to dig in a little, that might make it lighter work, but it also might not. It might be harder to coordinate with another person. So I'm happy to just give it a go and see what I can come up with for next week.
We have a
Shelby. I mean, Dave.
Yeah.
I will help, I think, with her having Shelby do her own research, and I'll do a little bit of research, and we'll see, rather than having to try and figure out how to meet with each other, because she doesn't have the time. Maybe both of us present what we found as far as compensation, or, maybe between the two of us, there'll be enough information, somebody can figure out something. But I don't think we need to meet necessarily.
No, I don't think so.
Well, and I'll say I didn't ask anybody to meet. I asked people to work together. So that would be perfect, Gwen. If you and Shelby, you can communicate, maybe you divide and conquer, and
right.
One of you looks into a few positions and the other looks into a few other positions, whatever, however that might work. That would be fantastic. And then, I think that makes sense. And then if we can, we'll put it on, it'll be on the agenda. We'll see where things stand next week, and then we can decide what sort of plan makes sense from there. The thing I'll clarify then, because I don't want to waste more time on this unnecessarily, is that I'd suggest then that basically when we're looking at operating expenditures, everything from select board down to assistant treasurer on that list, I think we should essentially table discussion of those until we can do some more research and come up with some ideas of what we want to do. One thing that I know would be helpful, and Guy, this might be something that you could help with, is with some of these numbers, because we've perpetuated them from year to year, I'm not sure that we know what the hour equivalent is behind the numbers.
Okay, we
You know what I mean?
did in 2016, we actually assigned numbers to the different
Okay, all right.
salaries.
That's fine.
So
Okay. So if that's something you have that you can share with those guys, then
I
we'll
will.
have,
I will.
just
I will
one
share
thing
the
I
amount of
don't
hours.
immediately know where that is. So that's good.
Okay.
Okay, is
But
everybody, by general consensus, is everybody okay with that approach for now?
Yes.
So what I'd like to throw out there, just as a reminder, though, and because it's not something that's on this, is the highway supervisor, the road supervisor, and road supervisor assistant should also be part of this.
Yes.
Or,
All
Yes.
salary.
which is not reflected in the operating expenditures. It's in the highway expenditures, but
Yep.
essentially Mark and his father.
Yep. So,
Uh-huh.
so from select
Yes.
board down to assistant treasurer will flag for tonight?
Sorry?
From
Yes.
select board down to assistant treasurer will flag for tonight.
Yep, right. We're just gonna
Correct.
skip over those.
Okay, so we're gonna jump to select board clerk?
Yep.
Okay,
So select board clerk is a simple calculation of what, we agreed to pay the clerk $75 a meeting. Sorry?
You skipped one, election officials.
No, that should also be there. I'm pretty sure in the VLCT book
Oh, okay.
compensation, I think there are details about election.
yeah, you're right.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I believe that that's something that should be.
Oh, I
looked
think we
into.
could work around that.
Maybe.
That and the auditors that's easy to do.
Okay.
So select board clerk is $75 a meeting. We assume 2 meetings a month, so it's $1,800. Any interest in changing that?
No.
No, if it's $75 a month times 26, that's
24.
$19.50.
It's 24 because there's only 2 meetings a month, there's not 26 meetings a year, rather. It's 2
Okay.
meetings a month. We never have 3 meetings a month. Or if we do have, like we have tonight, if we
Yeah.
have ad
That's not
hoc meetings, generally speaking, I do the minutes or somebody does the minutes.
Okay,
we
so
don't- we don't
$1,800?
end up paying for that. 1,800. Any concerns with that? Joseph, Shelby, Bruce?
No.
Okay. Animal control officer. We have historically been giving the animal control officer $500. Any interest in changing that from anyone?
No.
No, I don't have any.
No.
Okay. Assistant treasurer records restoration. Is that, I think that's actually a split out that is related to the assistant treasurer's rate. So that's something that we should skip because it will be impacted.
It's predicated on salary or,
Right, exactly.
compensation.
We're going to reevaluate. So,
Yep.
so I'm
Okay.
just saying for now that should be skipped because
Yep. Okay.
look into those, right?
Yeah.
Road commissioner, we added a few years ago a $500 stipend for road commissioner. Any
Mhm.
interest in changing that from anyone?
No.
You know, that's one of those things where it's there, whether they accept it or not is another issue.
Right, yep.
Right.
All right, payroll taxes, we should skip for the time being because that's going to be dependent.
Yep.
It's a calculation that will be dependent on all of the other salary numbers added
Same
up.
with payroll services.
Well, I don't know that, is payroll service or the fees actually related to the,
Yes, they are. They're related to the amount of
Jackson, man.
checks that are made and the salaries that are paid and the amount of work they have to do on W-2s.
right, but is that really, does that really vary if somebody's being paid $2 more than they were? Isn't it the
Oh, no. No,
processing?
that would not.
Isn't it the processing of the payroll? We're not talking
Right,
about
exactly.
adding any additional positions.
Right, and
or
this year,
frequency of anything. So
yeah, this year we've already paid $1,000 going into period 5. So I don't know if that's going to increase. My personal feeling is that I would keep it at $4,000, and then if there's a less, that's
sorry,
fine.
at $1,200. We're talking about payroll service fees.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I would keep it at $1,200 because that's basically where we're at right now.
Explain why it's higher.
Payroll right now, election payroll, hold on a second, payroll taxes, payroll fees.
Again, not payroll taxes.
Right now, we're at 457.51, and we're in period 5, so I would be comfortable at $1,200. I don't think it's going to go above that, to be honest with you.
Okay, we'll keep that at 1,200 for now. Supplies and postage. We've historically done $4,500.
Right, we dropped that
Last year
from
we were
6,000.
below that, but
We dropped that from 6,000 to 4,500. And to be honest with you, I'm comfortable with that because postage is going up and we're going to have a couple of elections where we're going to have to pay for postage. And there's some other things that we may have to get in the office that I feel comfortable at 4,500, to be honest with you. It gives us a cushion that in the event we don't use it, we may have to use that money for something else.
mhm. Okay. That makes sense to me. Any concerns from anyone? And when I'm saying anyone, I'm assuming if you're a board member and you have a concern, you're gonna unmute yourself and shout at me. If not, I'm gonna continue.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, moving on. So now so that to some degree completes the first page. Now we move on to the second page, which is a continuation of the operating expenditures for Fund 1. Town report expenses, we lowered that last year. I think we can lower it a little bit more. I just looked at the invoice again. And if anything, I think I might this year try to figure out a way to cut some more pages out of it. So I think we could drop it to 600.
Okay.
Okay.
Planning commission expense, we always have $100 in there, assuming that it's not a year when there's a town plan that has to be done. I think it makes sense to keep that $100 in there just in case they have any minor expenses. Any concerns? Yeah. Abatements. Abatements, a couple years ago, Guy, we had a higher number because we did have that one large abatement. We then dropped it down to 250. What is your feeling? What's your guess? At the
My
moment?
feeling is that there's a couple of people that may request an abatement, and they're bona fide abatements. I would almost like to raise that to $500 because I know it's going to be a difficult time for a lot of people with the epidemic that we're involved in, and I know there's like I say, a few people that may ask for, like I said, we're down to less than $600 for delinquent taxes, but there are people struggling. Believe me, they're struggling. And they do have an option to ask for an abatement. And I would just like to just bump that up a bit. It may be more and it may not be used. I wished it wouldn't be used, but the bottom line is I think we have to take that into consideration that it probably will be used.
Okay, so we'll bump that up to 500. Any concerns from anybody?
No.
All right. Legal notices, we've typically been budgeting $600. Last year, we were below that. I'll say this year, we've already gone over the $600 because as you'll recall, we have posted quite a few things between
Right.
paving and the various other bids. With luck, I don't think we'll necessarily, by the end of the fiscal year, be a whole lot more than that. It seems to me 600 is probably still safe. If anything, we could maybe be a little bit more concise with some of ours and save ourselves a little more money.
Well, as of period 5, we're at 617.52. That leaves us 7 months. So I'm not sure
Ooh.
legal expenses have gotten to be, I'm sorry,
Notices.
notices have gotten to be a little more expensive in the reformer, as you're aware of. I don't know, but whatever you feel, I just think that we may exceed that by a couple of $100 this year.
Well, yeah, and we probably will, but then I guess I'll say, last year we were $200 under it.
Yep.
I do think
Okay.
a lot of it depends on whether we pave or not, quite frankly. In years that
Yeah.
we're doing paving, we're going to run more.
The only
I'll
thing that we
freely
have-
say, as the person who has to put the notices in the paper, I could trim some of the language to make
And
them
put it on a website.
shorter or put more on the website so
Yep.
that we're paying less. We haven't really done that with the ones we've done this year. We've pretty much just run them as is. So I think it's a number that we could shoot to be
Okay.
within control of. We have the control over it ourselves to a large extent. Seminars, mileage and travel, we took that down from 1,500 to 1,000 last year. This year,
0.
yeah, we haven't, right, which may be something that just things haven't been accounted for, but I think it is entirely possible that we really haven't had much.
Well, I think for the new people
Physical
coming on board,
seminars haven't happened.
I
So-
think the new people coming on board have an opportunity to attend some of these seminars, treasurer, assistant treasurer, and so forth. And I think it's a good thing. So,
Yep. Yep.
Leave it.
I
think
propose we leave it at,
$1,000.
yeah, we'll leave it at 1,000, okay. Town office electric, 1,100,
that seems to be the same thing all the time.
yeah. And
Gives us a little wiggle room
I think
if we ever get a generator or an air conditioner.
been all right. Okay.
Quack when.
Okay, so leave that at 1,100.
Yeah.
Church electricity, 300. I don't know that, until I saw that, I don't know that I remembered that we were still budgeting for, I know we took the fuel out because of course at the time there was no fuel. But I guess we still do pay for the church electric out of the operating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
300 still seems like it's probably reasonable.
We're at 347.33 for period 5. So I think, maybe $500 would be
I don't think that, no, where are you,
Oh,
where are you seeing that? I see
I'm seeing-
116.
I'm
For the
sorry,
year.
Brookline Church, I'm sorry, excuse me. It's 88.40, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So yes, that's a good number. In
Okay.
fact, it could be less.
Let's stick with 300. I don't
Okay.
think it's worth going
It's a good
too
guesstimate.
much below that. I think now that it does stand to reason that now that there is heat in that building, that
Menai heater.
Right, that there's, the use of it will probably increase. So if anything, the electric usage is going to go up from what it's been before. So let's leave it there. Town office, the telephone service and stuff for the town office, 1750. Do we need
I
to
think
change
that's a
that at all?
fair number. Right now, we're at 695. So I think that's a fair number.
Okay, we'll leave that at 1750. Town office fuel, 2500.
Again, that's such a volatile figure, but I think plugging it at 2,500 gives us some wiggle room. Because that also includes we pay for the service of the
Service contract, yeah.
the furnace, which is I think it's $500 or $600. So I think $2,500 is a fair amount.
We're not budgeting anything for the fuel for the church, and I'd suggest we continue to do that. Fuel, I mean, they will,
Why?
presumably moving forward, they will have fuel charges, but those are going to be paid out of the meeting house fund.
Should we, Dave,
Yeah,
should we consider doing the Brookline Church, the electrical in the same way? I mean, we're doing one and not the other. Why should we have the fuel but not the electrical?
I think that's a longer discussion that I think for the moment, we should leave it the way it is, personally. And then we can see what the usage of that building becomes, and whether
Next year.
it's something that we should pass over to the meeting house entirely, or if we should continue to budget for it. I mean, it's also going to depend on whether they won't necessarily always have as much money as they have now. For $300, I don't think it's worth disrupting things, personally.
Excuse me, could you just back up? Tell me what
Yeah.
you decided for the Brookline Church fuel?
Nothing,
Nothing.
Okay,
like last year.
and okay,
Computer services, we've been doing, we bumped that down to 800. I know we went
yeah.
way over
That
that last year.
That was the reason for that is that the invoices came a little late, but the bottom line is this. I plugged in $900 because it's normally $807 for the 4 machines. And I see a little bump up coming up soon. And there's some peripheral software that I might want to incorporate into the computers. So I think $900 is a safe bet.
Okay, so we'll increase that back to 900. Okay, fire alarms, we bumped that up a little bit to 500.
We already have 610 for this year, and that's because I think the school, the church, and the town office are all involved in that fire alarm thing. We have the stickers that they have to submit to the state. Bruce, you can probably chime in on this. What do you know that they have to inspect the fire extinguishers and they have to inspect the furnaces? Is that the deal?
No, I don't know about the furnaces. That's never been said to me.
Well, they at least have to inspect the fire extinguishers when they come out in the meeting house and also at the school. I guess what I don't know, and this is, I suppose, a question for Samara ultimately, is do we end up then getting money back from the meeting house fund and or the school fund for the payment for their portion of the, because I mean, in theory, those funds should be paying for their fire alarm maintenance.
Dave?
Yep.
The school is taken out, I'm almost 100% sure.
Okay.
Okay,
And-
these are insurance regulations, so I'm not sure how that plays out. I think you're correct. We need to speak with Samara to see.
Well, I'm not saying, and I'm not saying that they don't get inspected. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if we, the town, gets billed, I mean, it's Samara can deal with this, with whatever. We pay code 3, $500 for all of it, but then we debit the meeting house for $50 and the school for $100 or whatever.
I agree with you.
In any event,
We'll leave it at 500.
we'll leave it at 500, even though let's leave it at 500. I don't think the difference is substantial either way. Legal services is a big ticket. We budget $3,000. We've been fortunate the last few years that we haven't had any legal services. So we haven't spent any of that money. But of course, at any point in time, our luck might run out.
I agree with you, David. I think we should have that as a cushion,
Buffer.
Yeah, because it only takes, at $200 an hour, $250 an hour,
Yep.
you need up $3,000 very quickly. So rather than have a big surprise, I agree that we should just probably keep it close to that number.
And also, if we don't use it, we're running a surplus, which is not a bad thing, and then we adjust at the end of the year. Just doing it dollar by dollar and not leaving a buffer like kind of what Guy's implying is not a good idea.
Well, yeah, and right. And also to Guy's point, we at any point in time we can run into something where we need legal.
Yep.
And we need $2,000 in no time. So we do need
Can happen.
something budgeted for it. Any interest in changing the number, or should we leave it at 3,000? I'd just as soon leave it at 3,000.
Me too.
Yeah.
What about the other select board members? Are they on board?
Yeah, what are your feelings? Joseph?
I think that makes perfect sense. It seems like, you wouldn't want to do less because, to Guy's point, it doesn't take very long of legal fees to eat through $3,000. But I think it's reasonable to just keep it there.
Shelby, do you agree?
Yeah, I think it needs to be in the budget as an insurance against the bad years. So I'm fine with it the way it is.
Okay. Excuse me. Rescue services, they actually give us this figure, and to the best of my knowledge, we haven't yet gotten that number. So we'll leave that blank for the moment, but assume it will be something. Actually,
Well, we've got 6,450 already in 5 months.
sorry. Yeah, well, right, but they
runs
tell us
about-
what our fee is going to be.
Yeah,
And-
it runs about $1,300 a month.
Right, although it does sometimes go up. I'm just saying that we budgeted last year for 15,482. I think we should pencil in 15,482 because I believe that I did hear on a call with them that they were planning on freezing. I might be wrong, but my belief is that they were planning on freezing their rates for at least a year.
Okay, that's fine
So
with me.
we'll pencil that in. We need to get actually clarification from them. I'll make a note to see what we can find out. Fire department services. I know Gary Livornia did tell us that is staying the same. So the $9,000 to Newbrook remains the same. That is not being increased. Mutual aid dues are another thing which we get told, and I don't believe I've seen any communication about that. They've pretty much stayed slightly below $10,000 typically. That's something else we need to look into. And Gary is tapped into that, and he might have an idea.
So you're leaving that one blank for now?
Yeah, we'll leave that one blank for now. Copies.
Copies, basically, we're staying below the allotted amount that we're allowed to have. So I'm gonna just put a 0 there because I don't think we're gonna exceed that. I did look at the number a couple of days ago, and we're below what I think we will generate for the year. So I don't think we'll owe them anything.
Okay. And do you think that that's a safe assumption for the next fiscal year? Could you
Yes.
take us
Yeah.
into-
I'm basing it on a 4 or 5 year scale, and basically, we never exceed it, and if we do, it
Even
would
if
be
we
$10
did.
or $15.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we'll bump that down to 0. The copier contract, last year was 1405-ish. Do we
Yes,
think it's going to
and
be?
basically,
similar?
there's a little fine print in the copier contract that allows them to increase the rate each year by a small percentage.
Mhm.
So I think at this point, I think we might want to bump that to 1475 because there's going to be a bump in it.
1475. Okay.
Yep. And when you think about it, that copier, which generates a great deal of money for the town in copies and everything else, it's a real good deal.
Mhm.
I think we're very fortunate to have that.
Okay. Town property maintenance. Pretty
So,
much always-
so the copier contract is going to be
Go ahead.
how much?
1475.
1475.
Okay.
Town property maintenance. We've been budgeting 1,200.
Is
What?
that for mowing lawns and stuff?
I don't
Property
know.
maintenance?
I don't know. Is that the mowing of the lawns or is that
I-
just the buildings?
Sorry?
Is that the property maintenance? Is that mowing lawns and taking care of the buildings or what is that?
I-
Just, is that?
I
mowing?
assume it's primarily mowing the lawns.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That's my assumption. It looks like what I'm looking at shows us having spent maybe a little under $900 so far this year.
Yep, 880, yep.
So, I mean, I guess I'd suggest we, for the moment, that we stick with 1,200, even though it may be that that's a little bit low. But since we don't really have a educated opinion of what to change it to, let's leave it the way it is. Town trash removal. I don't want us to get into a prolonged, I'll say, I don't want us to get into a prolonged discussion about this at the moment, although depending on how we do with the other things we were attempting, since we've skipped so many things, we might be able to have a bit of a discussion about this. I'd suggest that for the moment, the collective recycling collection item and the town trash removal, we put to the side and we come back to those. Because they're, of course, related.
Okay.
Any
All right,
objections
so
to
the
that?
500,
We're going to skip over
Just
town
question.
trash.
Yep.
And the recycling collection down below.
Yep, yep.
So VLCT dues, we were notified at some point that they are holding at 1723. Somewhere an email came through, I can't remember where, but I plugged it in. So I must have seen the number somewhere.
Yep.
So my belief is those are staying the same. Wyndham Regional Commission dues, I haven't heard anything about that. I don't know, Guy, if you've heard anything.
I've heard that they were going to do a level funding for the year due to the virus and so forth. So I'm comfortable with 1259.
So we'll plug in 1259. Nemrick license and support is sticking at $5,000 as far as I'm aware. So that will remain $5,000, which everyone will remember was an increase last year. Landfill fees for the solid waste district, it's up for public review, but assuming nobody has problems with it, that will remain the same as last year at $34.88. Their proposed fees are the same as last year.
What is the landfill fees for again?
It's for being part of the solid waste management district, essentially. All of the member towns, well, any of us who live in member towns have the ability to buy a permit and go take trash and recycling and various things there. There are some things you can do there without a permit. the big thing that we get, I would argue, out of being part of that management district and that these fees pay is that the management district handles all the state required paperwork for solid waste and also hosts household hazardous waste collection events, which if we were not part of that, we would have to host those ourselves 2 to 4 times a year, which would right there would cost us well more than $3,400. I think I mentioned this before, a number of towns over the years have looked into and considered leaving the district. Bigger towns than ours, who have full-time administrative staff, after looking into it, determined that it would cost them much more to complete all of the requirements that the state has than paying the membership dues for being part of the solid waste management, even though recycling is no longer one of the quote unquote services that we get for being part of the district. So does that answer your question kind of, Joseph?
It does, yes.
Law enforcement. I guess I'd also suggest, so that we can work through some other things, I'd suggest that we put aside for the moment the discussion of law enforcement. And we come back to it. We're not going to skip it, but let's come back to it once we've worked through the remainder of this and the appropriation, so that we know we at least got all of that stuff fairly settled. Any opposition to that?
Nope.
No.
Next up then is, because we're going to skip over recycling for now, insurance and bonds. We dropped it from 6,000 to 5,500 last year. At the moment, Guy, I don't know if you see this, but I don't see anything having gone into that.
No, I see a 0, but that's,
Which
that
may
could
just be because of the timing of billing. I have heard nothing that makes me think we need to increase it, so I'm going to suggest we keep it at 5,500. Guy, does that make sense to you?
it makes sense to me. In fact, there may be, from what I've read, there may be a lower compensation insurance rate that may kick in this year, but again, that's in the talks, but I think we're comfortable at that rate that we said, $5,500.
Okay, so we'll keep that at 5,500. I'll also say that we just, in case so people don't forget, we actually also have a somewhat corresponding insurance line in the highway budget where we do a bit of an approximation of splitting our insurance between the two budgets. So it's never a precise number. Next up is old cemeteries, lawn maintenance at the old cemeteries. So obviously, up until a few years ago, we had done
Nothing.
for a long time. Nothing had been done with the ancient cemeteries. Dot, when she was on the board, spearheaded reinvigorating that, because it is something that we are statutorily required as a select board to
Maintain.
pay attention to the ancient cemeteries in the town. So you'll remember last year, Tanner Wynot did a whole bunch of work on the Austin Cemetery, which is where the $6,000 number that you see there comes from. Of course, we got a $5,000 donation.
Grant.
Right.
Which offset most of that. So the town only paid whatever, 1,100 or something like that. To the best of my knowledge, we didn't really do any other work on ancient cemeteries. We started budgeting $2,000 a couple of years ago for this.
That was
I
mandated.
personally feel, sorry?
That was mandated. Town must spend $500 per cemetery. That's a statute.
Right, right. And even
Okay.
though we have spent nothing on them, and I'm gonna go so far as to wager we are going to spend nothing on them this year, we should continue to budget for it because it is something that we are, in theory, required to be dealing with.
Okay.
Understand that? Everybody's cool with that?
Yep.
County tax, we've been budgeting $5,400. At least when I pulled the number, when Samara pulled the numbers, we didn't really have anything allocated to that for last year or this year, but I assume it is a tax that we have been paying and continue.
Yes, and that's funny because I think there's somewhere, something was misappropriate somewhere, but we have to pay a county tax. Ann Patterson, who's the county clerk in Newfane, I'm almost sure I saw an invoice for that amount last year, and it was pretty close to that 5,400. I thought it was $5,300 and change, and it's predicated on some formula that they use. So I think $5,400 is a fair bet, and I bet somewhere along the line we paid that this year.
Yeah, I don't doubt that we paid it. I just mean it's probably something that, again, though, none of the numbers for the last fiscal year are final by any means yet. Samara is going through, there's a variety of things that she's cleaning up. They still need to be audited as well, but I'm sure the money is there somewhere. So we'll continue to budget $5,400 for that.
Yep, I think that would be a safe bet.
Okay. Animal impound expense, we've been budgeting $300 for it. We've been fortunate the last couple of years that when there have been some impounding fees, they've been able to be handled through the citations, and essentially the dog owners have ended up paying those fees, and we haven't been billed for anything. But we can't count on that. I think it still makes sense to budget $300 for it.
Yes.
There's bound to be a circumstance where we have to pay the Humane Society for some things that they can't recoup otherwise. Fact TV broadcast fees, we started last year at $1,000. I assume that's remaining the same.
That's pretty much the same. It's a little less than what they'd like, but the bottom line is that the public service television stations have lost a great deal of their income, and they cannot do some of the things that they've been doing on a regular basis. And that's why they've reached out to the different towns to help offset their costs. So I think $1,000 is a fair deal for what they do for us. There's a lot of things that are available to all the people who live in the town of Brookline. They can do their own shows. They can do their own documentaries. There's a lot of things. They can do editing. There's a lot of things that can happen at Fact TV. It's not just the fact that they broadcast our select board meetings and special meetings that we have. So I think $1,000 is a fair shake.
Okay, so we'll leave that at 1,000. Fire permits / other miscellaneous, we've been doing $50 for that. I'll be honest, I don't necessarily know what would go into that.
Basically, when Sonny Rink gets a phone call to submit to ask for a permit to burn a fire, he gets 50 cents per permit, and that's what the state pays, and we basically reimburse him for it, and it's pretty much around $50.
Okay. Because again, this might just be some bookkeeping, but we don't seem to have any money in there for last year or this year so far. Although this year, I don't know that we've been issuing any fire permits particularly, so that might not be surprising. Okay, so that finishes what we're, for the moment, going to discuss on page 2. A couple of things that I am have put on here, and I think we need to wait to see where we shake out on a lot of other things before we get into discussions of these potentially. But we are, as we talked about at the last meeting, we are going to have to update our hazard mitigation plan next year at some point.
Yep.
And that's going to cost us money. I've filled out the form to apply for a grant, which if we were to get that grant would pay all but probably $2,500 of that amount. Sorry, I'm plugging in my laptop because my battery's dying. So I'll just throw out there that's something to be revisited once we've been able to plug in a bunch of the other numbers and know more where we're at, is potentially building in $2,500 for the match for that grant,
Okay.
which is probably going to have to happen next year. And then the other thing that I didn't add there, but occurred to me after talking with Archie, was building in potentially $3,000, let's call it, for a radar sign. And that's something that can maybe dovetail eventually into our law enforcement discussion, I suppose. But if that's something that we decide we do want to consider, there might be money we can find in the highway fund to do it, but there may not be. And ideally, it would be something we would actually budget for and have more clarity about. But we'll come back to discussions of those once we've been able to plug in all the other numbers and have a better idea of where we're at as far as how much we're increasing the budget by. So if nobody has any objections, we'll move on to talking about appropriations and talk through that. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, that Wyndham Regional, is that the grant match that you're talking about?
Where are you?
Up at the top?
You talking about the LHMP grant match?
Yes, yes. What's
No,
that?
that's the mitigation plan.
Yeah.
That basically, that's in the event that we have a catastrophic event in town and we have to ask FEMA for some money. If we have a mitigation plan, we will only have to pay 12% versus 25% or maybe even more. So the litigation plan is a very important thing for the town.
And we have to update it. Well, we did one initial. I don't think we had one before it was done in 2017, but we have to update it every 5 years.
Yes.
So the beginning of 2022 will be the 5 years or something like that. Last time when it was done, it was done by Wyndham Regional. We paid Wyndham Regional to do it.
Right.
I don't know how much we paid them, but we paid them to do it. So the grants that we may or may not get from, I think it's a federal grant, would pay most of the money that Regional, presumably, or someone like them would charge to update it. Okay, so moving on to appropriations.
Sounds good.
So there's a few things that I should note. When I got here tonight to the town office, Samara had found some additional appropriations that hadn't been included in either of the other 2 appropriations folders that I had already found. So some of these blanks on the spreadsheet you're looking at, I now have numbers for. So let's just run through those first, okay? So Groundworks Collaborative, we did get a request from them for $300. There's a blank for Vermont Center for Independent Living. We did get a request from them for $80, which is the same as last year. Right below that, for Youth Services, we did get a request for $255, same as last year. And then we got an additional new request from the Rural Fire Protection Program Task Force for $100. I
Where's that?
If I remember, I just emailed before this meeting, I think I emailed photos of the letter.
That's for fire hydrants on personal property.
It wasn't a letter that I had when I put all this together the other night, but I have since found the letter. Did people get an email from me with an additional new appropriation request? Yeah, well, you got it at 6:30, like literally as the meeting was started.
No, I didn't see it yet anyway.
So that's a full scan of the letter. Anyway, we'll get to discussing that when we get down the list to it, but that'll be the last one on our list to go through. So
What was the name of that?
Rural Fire Protection Program Task Force, Vermont Rural Fire Protection Task Force, I guess. And you have the full letter in an email now. Okay, let's start at the top. I'm going to make the assumption as we walk down through these that if the organization has requested the same amount that they requested last year when we and the town voters approved the appropriation, that there's no need that we are going to approve it this year and put it as part of the recurring appropriations. Before we start, that's my opinion and how I think we should go about it. Gwen, do you agree with that approach?
Absolutely.
Bruce, do you agree with that approach?
I didn't understand what you said. Could you say that again?
So the appropriation that, sorry?
I'm sorry, level funding.
Level funding.
Let me explain.
You're speaking my language now. Yep, agreed.
Well, okay, but it goes beyond that. We're not even going to talk about the ones that are the same as last year that were voted by the.
That sounds like a good idea.
You're okay with that? Okay, all right.
Yes, I am.
Joseph, does that make sense to you?
It does.
Shelby, does that make sense to you?
Yep,
Okay.
it does.
All right, then we're going to jump immediately to the second one on the list, which is the Women's Freedom Center. Last year, and I assume the year prior to that, they requested and we granted them $500 in an appropriation. This year, they have requested $650. In the PDF of various things that I sent you guys named appropriation letters or something creative like that. You should see the letter from them, which presumably states their case for why we should give them $650. I will start off by saying that I personally don't have a problem with increasing the amount for this organization. I think it's a good organization. I don't have a problem with increasing it by $150. Let's just go around and get everybody's take. Gwen, what's your feeling? Do you want to increase their request or not?
I'm fine with that.
Bruce, do you want to increase their request or not?
I'm going to abstain only because I did not read that that you sent. So I'm going to let everybody else decide that.
Joseph, what's your feeling? Should we increase it?
Generally, I'm really heavily against appropriations to begin with, but out of everything on our town appropriations, I think that this might be the best organization in terms of how much they give back to our community. And reading the letter they have, there's some hard numbers there of we're a pretty small community, and what is it,
Yeah.
7+ people, that's a relatively sizable percentage when you really kind of think about what these people are potentially dealing with. So I guess I would say that I wouldn't be opposed to raising their appropriation.
Shelby, what do you think?
I think I think I'm fine with raising the appropriation to what they requested. I wasn't under the impression that we were able to approve. I thought it was just sort of like we were able to approve the appropriation as requested or not to be put on the, are we allowed to tweak the numbers?
We
Yes,
historically, well, we're allowed, I mean, not to overstate it, but we're allowed to do whatever we want.
Okay, okay. Yeah, no, sorry.
We historically, I would say, well, I don't know that I can draw a sweeping conclusion on how we've done things because we changed last year some of the ways that we do things. So what I will say is, like I'll take, for example, the More Free Library. Or I guess another example is, well, we have, when we present the appropriations to the voters, we show them what was approved, what they approved last year, and what has been requested this year.
Right.
So in the case of this, for example, you know, the chart would show that that the town approved $500 last year and they're requesting $650 this year. So I think it's transparent to the voters on what they're asking for. I know this maybe wasn't exactly what you were asking, or maybe it was the reason you were asking it. I would have a problem potentially with deciding for ourselves that we're only going to put forward $500 and not conveying what they have requested to the voters. Though sometimes in the past we have done that. And we can talk about that in further detail when we get down to the other recurring organization that's requested an increase, I suppose. But just focused on this one for the moment. I sense consensus that we are okay with presenting $650 as their request. Because again, you know, we are putting forward with some filter, if there are organizations that we think have absolutely nothing to do with us whatsoever, we're not necessarily putting them forward. But we're presenting to the voters what the people have requested, and the voters are deciding them. I will give a little bit of an aside, just to say, if anyone attended, and none of us did, I don't think, and if anyone attended the Newfane town meeting last year, you will know that there was quite a bit of discontent among townspeople in Newfane that the select board there had actually reduced what organizations had asked for. I'm going to say without maybe as much clarification for the voters as the voters would have liked. And it became a large topic of discussion at town meeting, their town meeting, about that. I personally would prefer that we not do that. So I guess to the point of whether we all necessarily agree with the Women's Freedom Center getting $650, I would say that's why we are going to get a vote, like everybody else in the town will get a vote on these appropriations. But in this case, it seems like we have consensus that everybody's okay with the idea of them increasing it anyway. Is that fair? Before we move on? Shelby just dropped off. I'll let her get back in. Shelby, I'll give you one chance. We're going to move on from the Women's Freedom Center and leave it at 6:50 unless.
Yeah, sorry, my computer died, the battery, so I was gone for a little bit.
It's okay.
But yeah, that's fine.
I've been there. I had that happen at work the other day while I was hosting a meeting, which was,
Ooh.
and I was sharing my screen and everything. So anyway, we're going to leave all of the others that remain the same as they are, and then we're going to jump down to Senior Solutions, who last year requested $500, which has been typically what they've requested for the last few years. This year they have requested $650. Again, their letter and all of their paperwork that they sent has been included in the scan that I sent all of you guys. On the third page, they sort of summarize various calls and things that they've done for residents in Brookline. I don't, I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I am 100% committed myself to increasing their
Last year, we didn't increase it.
their appropriation. So Gwen, do you think that they asked for an increase last year and we?
I think, if I remember correctly, I think they did. And I think we discussed it and we felt that there was enough other senior programs out there that we didn't feel that they did more services for Brookline than normal. So I don't think it was approved last year. And I think last year they asked for an increase. And I think we stuck at the $500. I think.
Yeah, well, last year you did give them $500.
Yeah.
Right. Although I guess to the earlier comments or to my comment, if they did actually, I honestly don't remember. I could try to go to the filing cabinet and find last year.
No, that's all right.
I think I'd probably shoot myself in the process. So I guess I would put in, I guess what I would say, again, harking back to what I said before about a little bit tinged by the experience of the Newfane meeting last year, and maybe some other consideration. I feel like,
Yes.
personally, if they've requested $650, we should present that, and the town voters should decide yes or no on that. And that we shouldn't potentially misrepresent what the organization has requested.
Let the town vote on it.
But that's just my opinion. And like I say, clearly we haven't always acted that way. So we're not bound to do that. And maybe in another year I'll feel differently, but right now that's how I feel. Gwen, what's your feeling? Do we present the 650 or cut it, or what do you think?
I guess present it and let the town decide. I think it's the same reasoning for the Women's Freedom Center. I think the town needs to decide if we increase it or not.
Yeah. Bruce, what do you think?
I don't have a problem with the town deciding. I just got a question. Did they increase their services a lot, or has it pretty much been stable over the years? That's my question. I'll confess I didn't read that whole article yet on Senior Solutions.
I'm not gonna speak for them. I mean, I will say that they do sort of highlight that they responded to, if I'm understanding it correctly, they responded in 19 calls and office visits. This is for Brookline. They, if I'm in, the fiscal year that ended in June. 3 residents received assistance with Medicare issues. They provided 2 residents with in-home case management. for 11 and a half hours. They provided no nutrition services and programs and no home delivered meals.
No visitor.
No Brookline residents received respite grants for caregivers. No Brookline residents received services from a volunteer, because I guess they have a separate structure for volunteers, perhaps. And then there's something about special assistance that they say 0 Brookline residents receive special assistance.
Well,
So-
I'm of the opinion we should decide. I don't want to see this a separate article for, if it's going to be a separate article just for senior solutions.
Can I just clarify? It's not going to be a separate article. It's going to
So it will be,
it's going to be,
it'll be left open probably and proposed to the town. Do you want, how do you do that? It has to be done separately, doesn't it?
it would be like any other recurring appropriation, like we've done repeatedly in past years with the More Free Library, for instance. I don't know
Oh,
how
I see.
many examples there are where More Free Library, they didn't this year, but typically More Free Library has increased their ask year to year.
Yeah,
We have always
told the
presented
town.
what they've asked for.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
understand. Yeah.
yes, it's true. If somebody, if unfortunately, given that assuming for the moment that we're probably going to a Australian ballot structure, somebody who
That's
sees
true.
this and gets to vote on this is either going to have to, if for some reason they don't want $150 more going to senior solutions, their
have to vote.
recourse would be to vote down all of the appropriations.
Gods.
Whereas in a normal town meeting, somebody could make an amendment.
Correct.
But I'm going to say, I don't want to overthink how we adjust to that scenario because that's out of our control. I still don't see any reason why we would present the article any differently than we have historically. So it would be, they would see last year was approved 500, this year requested 650 in the chart of all of the other recurring. And they would see the rolled up total number presumably is going to be more because of these increases as well. And people voted up or down.
So basically what you're saying is that if the people see the amount that's requested, the total amount 6656, and it's increased by $300, they could vote down and they would just basically
They would just
not
say no.
approve the appropriations.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how else it's going to work if that's the
Yeah.
way.
I was kind of thinking that given the way that this year is, that I mean, before you said that, my thought actually leading up, while you guys were having this conversation, was that any line items in the appropriations that resulted in a change from last year and or were new,
Then have a yes,
it
no.
would be helpful to have them be separate items for people to vote individually on. That's what I was kind of
That's a
thinking. And
point.
then you were like,
That,
I mean, given this year, because we can't make any amendments,
Yeah.
there's a few notable changes to, that aren't just a couple dollars. And I just was thinking that maybe, we're already doing an Australian ballot. If you separate out anything with a change, we can just approve that we're going to put all of the changed numbers on. And then if you guys could mute, if you're going to have a side conversation, it's hard with my earbuds just when there's.
Yeah, it's distracting for me also. Shelby, I see your point. I guess that'll be something we'll have to discuss and hash out if and when we get to the point when we're putting all of those articles together. I guess I would say for the moment, in order to keep us on task, let's worry less about exactly how we're presenting the information on that ballot and more about, are we going to present that information? So,
Can I chime in?
yeah, please.
I kind of there's merits to everything that's been said, but I would agree with you, David, that I think it's a mistake to try to, not that we be trying to hide this from the town, but I think the best way to do this is to just allow the town to vote on it. And there's obviously some difficulties with this year. It would have been awfully easy if it was a regular year. But if I remember correctly, last year we had a separate line item for two of the new appropriation requests, the therapy riding, and I thought there was something else as well.
Huh.
Yeah,
And
we did. And those, because we did that because historically we have done those for new appropriations for organizations who had not previously been appropriated any money.
okay, so that it would be a slight difference than
Yeah,
just
but
someone's asking for an increase. But I would say that it might be best to just present that we could kind of agree that a blanket statement that we would present everything that was requested, and if there was any change we could simply put it as a separate article. If there wasn't a change, lump it together, and if there was a change, just list it as a separate article. I think that way we're not putting ourselves in a hard spot making a decision that I think in all rights is up to the town to make. And we're also not really setting ourselves up for the potential mess of like the entire thing getting voted down, or the aggravation of somebody that would want to vote down one but not wanting to vote down all of them, and not really being able to amend it as in a regular year. I think it might be best to present everything, but like I said, if it changed, present it in a separate article.
So not that I necessarily want to go to this extent, and I don't really think it's warranted, but I mean, so the scenario we envision is that there's someone who has been okay with the idea of Senior Solutions getting $500, but might not be okay with the idea of them getting $650. What people are thinking?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think that is a possibility, and it could seem rather trivial to.
No. Sorry, let me clarify. It's not that we think that there are people who feel that giving anything to Senior Solutions is potentially a bad idea. Because what happens, of course, when we break out any of these into their own article is, I'm just going to say that I think it's, at the very least, it subliminally, if not actively, increases the likelihood that that appropriation will be rejected.
Yeah.
So in an ideal world, and I'm not saying we would do this, honestly, every one of these should be its own article. And then everybody can vote up or down on every one of them. Because right now, people are having to either, if they want money to go to 9 of these organizations, but not the 10th one, their only choice would be to either vote it up for the 9 that they want, or down because of the one that they don't want.
No, that's a really good point. And yeah, we take it for granted, but on a regular year, since people can discuss it with the whole town, it's not a problem whatsoever.
It would be an interesting thing to know. And Guy, I know we talked about this before, that as we start to get closer to when we're going to, assuming for the moment, and I don't want to get into a big discussion about it because I know we'll talk about it next week, getting into at the point where we decide that we are going to do an Australian ballot for these things, we really need to know how other towns have done them in the past.
And you know, the funny thing is I
So
sent out
VLCT must have models and whatever. If this is what they want everybody to do, they're going to have to help us work through these things.
I don't know if you saw my email that I sent out today from Will Snelling rather, from the election division. He reinforced what the thinking was in Montpelier in regards to legislation. And there is some softening going on up there, that they may realize that this is a big burden cast upon towns who vote from the floor. And there is some movement to maybe rethink of what they're doing. But like you
Yeah,
have
although
mentioned before,
yeah.
we have a timeline.
Yeah,
And-
we have a timeline, and again, we'll talk about this more, and I know it's not really on the agenda, but I will say, you know, I saw the email from Carolyn Partridge, and some of the other emails that have come through about the legislature and all of the things that they suddenly want to try to do for people. The thing I will say is I haven't seen a single thing that any of them that have said that's actually going to make anything better for anyone. You know, the idea of postponing town meeting serves no purpose whatsoever for anyone.
No, the only reason that was for was maybe it would be warmer weather, or maybe the virus would be
Right.
somewhat,
Yeah,
but that's
exactly.
not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, none of it, and you know, and Shelby, you brought this up last time, and maybe, I don't know if you have any recollection of this, but you know, your town voted by Australian ballot. How did they do things like this, appropriations and budgets and stuff like that? You know,
The budget and the big stuff, the budget and the appropriations, I believe it was all the town officials on every given year.
Yeah.
So anything where there were people, but there was always the in-person town. So even like towns like that are going to have to figure out what to do this year about how they're going to put appropriations in an Australian ballot, because that portion was still very much that traditional Vermont town meeting day format when it came to how they were reviewed and approved.
Okay. Okay. So sorry, not to get us too side. So maybe we can get some assistance from somebody in this state, and moving forward, maybe we figure out how we go about these appropriations. But again, you know, I don't, to my point, and just not that I want to go to this length, but honestly, I'm seeing an argument for every appropriation being its own article. But at the very least, I see your guys' points, and it makes sense to me as when we start to sculpt that maybe we do that for the ones that have changed at least. Though I do think that is putting them in the same, depending on how we word it, it sort of puts them in the same boat as people who've not had anything approved before, which I think maybe does them a little bit of a disservice, but we'll figure that out. We'll figure out how to do those when we get there.
Yeah, just to kind of add a thought to it. Since I mean, honestly, this is depending on how the Australian ballot goes, we can't necessarily, you know, mess the whole thing up just for the appropriations. And if we just listed everything on one vote, including the increased request of this year, I don't think that would necessarily be too big of a problem. I think it would be better to have every single one of them as a line item. But in the absence of that, I think I would agree with you that it is kind of singling out the organizations who asked for more in what could be an unfair way. So I'm thinking at this point, it might be best to have line item for everything, but if we can't do that, just everything goes in one and not single any of them out.
Okay. Well, we don't have to figure any of that out now, but we'll.
Yeah, I was just.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. Yeah, sorry.
Just one last thing. I'm going to look up to see I'm going to ask VLCT to see what the select board's responsibility is in regards to appropriations. I just want to get a second opinion on that from
Okay,
a.
yeah, that would be
an
good.
attorney.
Yeah, that would be, thanks, Guy. I would appreciate that because it is, to
town
Shelby's
has a-
earlier point, we have not always, we haven't been, we've been consistently inconsistent ourselves.
Right.
And I think
And
a lot of
the-
boards are. It's not
The
just.
select board has a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to the town. And I'm going to ask the VLCT to see what that responsibility actually is.
Okay, so skipping all the way down, so I will highlight the fact that now, nowhere have any of us found appropriation requests from the Southern Vermont Therapeutic Riding Center or from Winston Prouty for this year. I know that in the past, or at least last year, and I will say even this year, we hadn't received, like last year, we hadn't received anything from, I think, the American Red Cross, and we hadn't received anything from Windham County Humane Society. I know that I think Guy reached out to somebody at American Red Cross. I reached out to Annie at the Windham County Humane Society to make sure that they knew that they were about to miss their window.
Yeah.
If anyone knows, how do we think we deal with the Southern Vermont Therapeutic Riding and the Winston Prouty? Do we think we should make some effort to contact these people to say, we didn't get an appropriation request from you, were you intending to send us one? Or do we just leave it
Oh,
alone?
well, last year we gave the Vermont therapy, instead of $500, we gave them $100. The select board took it upon themselves to decide that, rather than $500, we would give them $100. So again, the
No,
select
that's
board.
not, Guy, that's not true.
Oh,
And
I'm
I
looking
think
at,
I don't think that's quite the point. Sorry that I was trying to.
I'm
Last
sorry.
year, the voters approved $500, which is what.
Yes, you're right. $500. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But my point is they haven't sent us requests for this year.
Oh, okay.
So-
Don't they know the rules though? Isn't
Well-
the rule that
It's on the
that's always
website.
been that if they want appropriations, they are supposed to let us know what they want and what services? Isn't that a standard thing that everybody's supposed to do? So if they didn't do it, then it's not right for us to accept it.
Okay, and that's fair. And I honestly don't have any particular axe to grind on behalf or opposed to either of these organizations.
Me
What I
neither.
will say is this. I have in front of me 3 different folders where I found appropriations. And actually, I only found one of them. Samara found the other 2. One of them was labeled last year. So I don't have a huge, if everyone else has supreme confidence that they knew when they should have gotten us something
yeah.
and they didn't send us anything and we'll just ignore them, then that's fine. I'll say in the
agree.
case of the Windham County Humane Society, we didn't have anything from them, but I know how to contact someone at the Windham County Humane Society. So I emailed her and said, we haven't gotten an appropriation from you. Did you mean to send one? And she said, oh yes, I'm sending it right now. So I think it's not unreasonable to afford these organizations the same courtesy.
Bill,
The voters did approve to give them money last year. So clearly these are organizations that the voters are in favor of supporting.
Well, after you explained it that way, I agree.
But the corollary to that is I'm not tracking down who to reach out to for either of these organizations. I don't have the time to be able to do that. Does anyone know any contacts at either of these organizations or is willing to reach out to them to find out whether they intended to send us a request or not?
I will reach out to Southern Vermont Therapy and Winston Prouty.
Okay, that would be great, Guy. Thank you.
Can I just say that and maybe I'm not seeing it from a certain angle, but it seems as though it's inappropriate to me to contact someone and ask them if they want us to give them money. And I recall having this.
I don't think that's a fair representation of what I'm saying.
No, no, and I'm not trying to.
Well, that's
I'm
what you
not trying
said.
to-
and
yeah.
I don't think that's what I said.
Okay, so regardless of how it was worded, I feel as though reaching out to someone and saying, "Hey, did you mean to ask us for money?" That's what it is, and it seems as though it's not really our place to and I know that they requested it last year, but unless we have proof that we lost it, or we have some sort of reasonable belief that we misplaced it, it seems as though it's not really our place to go asking these organizations if they want us to give them money.
Okay, I guess I just refer back to and I think I've said it multiple times now, the 3 different folders that we eventually came across that had things that were appropriations in them.
Yeah. So do we?
So I thought I was being clear. I have very little confidence that they might not have sent something that didn't get through to us. But it's up to everybody else.
I think that especially given this year and the chaos that's ensued, I think regardless of what we want to be the rule for a normal year or all the time, I think we should be consistent. And I think everyone deserves a little bit of extra courtesy this year. And if they've asked in the past and were approved, I don't see anything wrong with reaching out and just checking in and making sure to clarify their position. And I think it saves us a headache in a couple weeks if they remember on their own, but we're 2 seconds away from approving our final. So yeah, I think that reaching out to them is a great idea for this year.
Good point, Shelby.
Joseph, are you okay with that?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm trying to hold up the whole process, but I'll say on principle, it seems like this is a poor precedent to set, and now you know, if you really do think that we misplaced them, which
I think it's possible.
Yeah.
I've seen enough evidence to my point that I keep belaboring.
Yes.
There are a bunch of appropriations that we just discovered today. I mean, prior to a couple hours ago, we wouldn't have appropriated anything for Groundworks Collaborative or Vermont Center for Independent Living or Youth Services.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to look at last year, when like, for example, the Humane Society, when you reached out to them, we hadn't misplaced anything of theirs, correct? And they just forgot to send it.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make any sort of jab at them directly, but I think if someone forgets to do something, whether it's just because they're overworked or because whatever it was, again, I don't think it's really our place to go asking people, because at that point, you could. I feel like it sets a bad precedent, and maybe this year, again, this year is a little different. So I'm not saying that I'm so ready to put my foot down hard.
Right. Okay, what I'll say though is I will remind people that last year when we did this, we discussed it. And we discussed that we would do it. So to now decide that it was setting a bad precedent would have been something perhaps better brought up last year when we had an actual conversation where we laid out the various recurring people for whom we couldn't find any appropriations, and should we reach out to them to see if maybe they intended to send us something and hadn't. So. But
yeah, and I recall having a
taken.
similar thought, but I very well may not have voiced that. And yeah, in hindsight, I feel like maybe I should have. But
okay.
Yeah, I just think maybe moving forward, because I remember we had a talk too about trying to kind of standardize how we do these appropriations. I think that it would benefit us to, not this year, but in the future, standardize how we go about, posting them and voting on them, and contacting people if they don't reach out to us, and so on and so forth.
Well, and maybe some of that, Guy, when if you get some clarity from the LCT about
What our obligation
what
is.
our obligations are, maybe that'll help nudge us in one direction or another, depending on what
Right.
you say.
I just think that we have a sort of moral obligation to help people who are less fortunate than us. And, whether it be the fire department or Southern Vermont Therapy, if they help our town, we should be willing to give a small little bit of help for them, regardless of whether they ask for it or not.
Okay, so let's just finish up appropriations and then we're going to call
It
it.
asked.
So the new appropriations are listed below, and people have scans of all of the letters that accompany those. I guess I'm tending to assume, based on our conversation, that we will. Well, I guess maybe I won't assume that yet. So Vermont Family Network, someone we, to the best of my knowledge, haven't received a request from in the past, requested $250. SVEDS, which is part of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corp, requested $1,590, which I will note is something that they request every year. And in past years, we have not even presented that as something to the voters to consider, because we have not historically found that organization to really directly benefit Brookline residents in any way. And also, I think because of the amount of the appropriation, we've not even thought it worth suggesting. And then we also found this Vermont Rural Fire Protection Task Force request for $100, which I sent around to people. I'll kick off by saying, in keeping with our earlier conversation, certainly in the case of Vermont Family Network and Rural Fire Protection Program, my inclination is to say that we do include these. Again, they would be separate warrant articles, like the Southern Vermont Therapeutic Riding Center and Winston Prouty were last year. They would be warned separately for the voters to approve or disapprove. SVEDS, I still don't think it's even worth suggesting to anybody that we would give that amount of money to that organization. But that's just my view. Let's just go around and get people's take on whether we present one, two, or all three of these as separate articles, or none of them. Gwen, what's your feeling about
So the rural fire protection, that was new, correct?
Yep.
And the Vermont Family Network.
Yep.
So those would be put on as new articles, asking the community if that's what they want to do. And as far as SEVIDS, I agree with you. We didn't feel that there was other programs in the same idea of their corporation that we benefit from, but nothing on this one. So I agree on the 1590, no. And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry,
I'm done.
Sorry, I cut you off, Glenn. Sorry.
That's okay.
But you do agree with putting forward the other two, right?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Bruce, what do you think about those three?
Yes, I'm still here. I agree with everything Gwen said, 100%.
Okay. Joseph, what do you think about these ones?
Well, personally, I definitely cringe at seeing that appropriations request, but I just, it's tough because, I mean, we've been talking about how we don't have a very consistent track record on this, and we do need to figure something out. But I feel like they're not so far away from us as a community that we can just write them off without a second thought. You know, it's not like it's Hawaii Credit Corporation.
Right.
And so someone could, I don't know much about them and I didn't read their entire article, but it seems reasonable to believe that somebody could make an argument to say that they benefit Brookline residents. And that being the case, it seems as though we're putting ourselves in a relatively precarious position by giving everybody else the opportunity to be voted on by the town and deciding that this one shouldn't be.
Mhm.
But again, with all the problems we've discussed this year, I'm not 100% sure of what I would want to do moving forward. But again, 100%, I don't think we should give it to them. But I just don't know if it's a very strong position as the select board to say that we'll make this decision in their case, but the town gets the vote on everything else.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I mean, and yeah. Shelby, what's your thinking?
I think that we should put forward all the appropriation requests that we've received. I think the fact that I personally will probably struggle with whether or not to vote for them. I actually think they're a great organization. They've made an effort to come to 2 of our meetings, which I think is in the last year, or last 2 years, which I think is a good, shows a lot of effort that they're trying to reach out to communities and have services that'll be useful. So I would probably, as a voter, go back and forth on whether or not I vote for that large amount. But I think that it should be put forward to the town to see if they want it. And given that it would be an individual item, I'm not actually that concerned about whether or not it actually ends up getting, if it ends up getting it or passing, the town really wanted it. So great.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, I'm happy to not have an extra $1,500 in the budget. So I think it should be just transparent. Everything goes through this year, especially because we've had we'll have less of an opportunity to discuss this with the town than we would in a normal year. So
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, both of you, Joseph and Shelby, you both make good points, and you've actually convinced me as well that I think that makes the most sense, especially in this year, that we put forward all of them as they are. People have the ability to vote them up or down. And right, why would we give the transparency? Why aren't these people afforded the same opportunity that any of the other organizations are? I think that makes sense to me.
David,
So
are you talking about just those 3 as new articles or every one of the appropriations?
Well,
Now,
I think we have to have a longer conversation about.
Oh, God.
At the very least, these 3 would be their own articles.
okay.
How we present all of the other appropriations, I think, is a discussion that we'll leave for when we're crafting the articles. Okay. Any last thoughts about appropriations?
No.
All right. Okay. So before we adjourn, let me just highlight a couple of things, which is that we still have a lot of things we have to talk through. Obviously, once we've gotten some details and some research has been done on compensation, we have all of the compensation for all of those positions to talk through. We'll have the behemoth of recycling to talk through, as well as the associated not law enforcement, but the associated trash collection, but then also law enforcement. And we have to just sort of start to gauge, keep in mind and just have in the back of our heads as we start to get ready for this, that this budget is going up. Purely based on stuff we've talked about. I haven't plugged in everything, but our budget is going up by some amount of money over what it was last year. So we need to prepare ourselves for that and what decisions that makes us want to have or not have. I don't personally think it's a bad idea. You know, things cost more money over time. That's the way the world works. So I will also say that Samara, I don't know how soon Samara is going to have the final numbers from the last fiscal year to know whether we ended the year in a deficit or a surplus. I think she's pretty confident that we ended in a surplus for the operations side, but we don't know how much. And we'll have to decide if we end up with a surplus, we'll have to decide how we go about presenting that, whether we just present to give it back or if we want to set aside money, stuff like that. So there are a lot of things we still have to decide. So next week's meeting, we really need to try over the next couple of meetings, because unless we want to have to call another special meeting to deal with more budget stuff, we're going to need to get through a decent amount of budget things to finalize it in the course of the next couple meetings. So I guess what I would leave as a last request is when we get to the meetings, people need to be on time. We need to be prompt. We need to be concise, and we need to, as much as possible, not bring up extraneous things that can wait until we've gotten through the budget and the warnings. And on that note, I would make a motion that we adjourn. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Bruce. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 8:52.